and yet another entry into the hidden history of the African American warrior. Now, much has been talked about on this show about the 761st Tank Battalion, otherwise known as the Black Panthers. The 761st was activated at Camp Claiborne, Louisiana, deployed to Europe during the landing of Omaha Beach in France in October of 1944. What you may not know, however, is a story about a man who goes by many titles, many names. He's been called Black Captain America, but his particular duty officer called him himself the baddest man in the 761st. That's according to the unit's historian. I'm talking about Warren G.H. Crecy, Sergeant Warren G.H. Crecy. This man's story is a testament to the falsehood that was spread about the African American warrior before he was allowed to fight in every war in which he excelled in fighting. But specifically, you've heard, of course, about Lieutenant Vernon J. Baker of the Buffalo Soldiers Infantry, but Crecy's story is particularly interesting because his battalion, of course, formed in 42, was formed amongst much upheaval, of course, strife in this country. Men expected to go and fight abroad for it, facing racism on all sides, including when they got overseas to fight. But the story of Crecy, the most famous member of the Black Panthers, is kind of akin to that of what you saw from Jackie Robinson in his protest before actually going and integrating Major League Baseball. Crecy was often said to be a level-headed guy. The 761st historian who dubbed him the baddest man in the 761st, Tres Van Anderson, said that Crecy was described as quiet, he was well-liked, he was polite. But that went out of the window when Nazis showed up for a fight. Crecy was ready, and he showed that much on one particular occasion. Allies fell into an ambush, and Sergeant Crecy got into his tank, sped across territory to find his buddies there, only to be greeted with mortar shells, rocket fire from Nazis. He then was immobilized. His tank was nearly blown up. He was able to escape, however, and get to a jeep where he was able to mow down, as it's been described by the historians, Nazis with his .30 caliber machine gun, and subsequently save his pals who had come under ambush, finishing off with artillery spotters there, getting his allies to safety. There's another instance where Crecy is said to have gone, quote, berserk, end quote. The historian said that Sergeant Crecy got so angry at one point when he noticed his comrades were pinned down by German fire that he got to the machine gun on top of the tank, and he had no actual protection. He then subsequently starts to take down Germans as soon as he can. He went to a specific machine gun nest where he had drawn down rocket fire on himself, but he continued to fight. The historian said that he was so angry he had to be pulled away from the machine gun, and its trigger pried from his finger. By the end of World War II, Crecy got a Silver Star, 4 Purple Hearts, and a Bronze Star, nominated for the Medal of Honor. But as the story goes, the only person to live long enough to receive that honor was, in fact, Vernon Baker. The Black Panthers historian marked Crecy with 400 kills. That's how he got the name, the baddest man in the 761st. The battalions overall received many awards and services for their effectiveness. The 761st in total lost 36 men. So you've heard about the 761st, but if you need a specific soldier to mention when talking about the 761st Tank Battalion, you should mention Sergeant Warren G.H. Crecy, the man dubbed the baddest man in the 761st. In October of 52, Crecy was hit with a mortar shell that left him severely injured. He was then shipped home. He spent the next 10 years in various hospitals before passing away in 1976. A bad man indeed. Almost the end of the year here, folks. This will be the last show, last live show of 2017. First and foremost, however, we are still celebrating Kwanzaa, Habaragani, Ujamaa.
Economics.
Corporate economics.
Supporting each other economically. That means supporting businesses that serve our community and are Black-owned, operated. And then it comes from this idea, and that doesn't mean you don't spend your money. You spend your money wherever you want to. You make it, you spend it. But the whole idea of what was happening in 1966 and prior to, and it's almost a visionary thing, when we think about, when I think about, because I was here, what the communities were like prior to desegregation. Almost every African American community had it was a little nucleus within itself. So when you went to Surrey City, for example, there were restaurants, there was cab companies, there was a movie theater, there was a beauty college. There were things taking place. If you went to Main Street in Biloxi, there was a shoe store and a bakery and restaurants and movie theaters, and so businesses were there and they were thriving, and almost every community had their own cleaners, had stores, where you could get groceries. Now, you might have to go to the A&P in downtown Gulfport. When we were a kid, that was the only store there was a big store, but there was a local store there right there in your community where you could get everyday things of bread and milk and canned goods and things like that. So every single community had, and so people had their own businesses inside each of those communities, and so you saw the dollar being turned over in the communities. I think someone said the other day that it's up to like 7 times before it ever left the community. And so that kind of thought of supporting. My idea is I support people who support my community, but also people who support community, period. And there's a big difference for me when I see large corporations or large businesses that have no feedback into the community, that aren't giving back. I need something that I can see in your work that you're giving back to, and I can see you involved in community. That's important for me. Yeah. That's how I am. So, and everybody has to choose their own and do their own, but that's the whole concept behind that. If we could, and for me, I take it another step. Cooperative economics, in my head, has to also involve teaching, especially younger generation coming in, but teaching our community about how to make money work for you and work for your family so that you can prosper and grow. So that you're not, you're saving, you're investing. And investing doesn't mean necessarily you're out buying stocks or you're buying land. My daddy used to say, land, baby, always hold a piece of land. And so how are you reinvesting into your future as opposed to just buying disposable goods that at the end of the day, you're like, I don't know what I did with all my money. Yeah. That's important. That to me is a part of that. So that's where we are.
Ujamaa. I'm sorry, Ujamaa. I get those two mixed up. Yesterday was Ujamaa. Today is Ujamaa.
With 2 A's.
With 2 A's. Cooperative economics. I got it now. That is certainly something to impart into the community. It seems as though, like you said, there's a serious constriction in community-owned businesses in the communities in which they're from, serving the communities in which they're in. And I hear all these stories about Main Street and Fair Street and all these hubs of of black business. And I wonder, and I continue to wonder when I ride down and I see, especially in Jackson, what was, and just kind of imagine being back in those times, how this all kind of went away, and where that money went that was generated by these businesses. I think there's a lesson to learn for folks in our generation, mine and Whitlock's, about maintaining what's already there and pushing it forward into the future. I think that there's a severe disconnect in a mentality of owning your own and, like you said, helping your community by serving your community. There seems to be a disconnect with the younger generation. I just don't know how so much business has fallen by the wayside from one single generation to another, maybe two. But not that this isn't a huge span of time here. This is things that you can still remember that we have no frame of reference about. So I think today in particular, today's principle is particularly important when celebrating Kwanzaa and trying to understand how to positively go forward and taking those lessons from the past and applying them to the future, which unfortunately I think too many people don't do.
Yeah, and I think in terms of those days, it's not like the people who own these businesses and maintain their communities were rocket scientists.
Right.
It didn't, it didn't. My great grandmother, my great grandparents owned their own property and ran businesses. And my grandfather, one of my grandfathers, my grandfather, my daddy's dad, he worked at the shipyard in New Orleans. He did that, but he also had an upholstery shop. He had a building in the backyard behind the house, and he reupholstered furniture. He made mattresses. His brother was the Iceman. And I tell this story all the time about when I moved to St. Louis and I was like 18, 19 years old. And I had a job in a department store. And I'm waiting on this couple. And the lady, I hear this lady say to her husband, "I keep looking at that child. She looks so familiar to me." And I guess he looked at me for the first time, and I heard him say, "She ought to look familiar. That's a Lombard." Man, I spun around. I was like, he says, "Aren't you a Lombard?" I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "Who you belong to? The Iceman or the Mattress Man?" It spoke volumes. Mm-hmm. And so they had their own. There was no son to son. Well, I worked 8 hours, I'm finished. No. And so they had their own businesses, and they were able to buy property, maintain that property, and raise a family. Mm-hmm. And so you saw people that had 9-to-5 jobs. My grandmother never worked. I guess, I don't know. Neither one of my grandmothers ever worked. I don't know. My other grandfather was, he was a Pullman porter. Mm. And so he worked on the railroad from New Orleans to New York. And so he'd be gone 2 weeks, he'd be home a week. And neither one of my grandmothers ever worked. But they made it. Turn the lights off if you're not using them in the room.
Waste not water.
You do what you have to do. Everybody had a garden. Mm. Everybody did what they had to do, and they didn't waste anything.
Right.
Wasted nothing. So corporate economics, and sometimes it has to start inside your own house, with just how can I best use my money wisely right here in the house. And sometimes it's a matter of, I remember one time my daddy had little signs. He worked someplace at some construction site, and I don't know where he found these little signs, and he had them on every light. What do you call those things? You turn the lights off and on.
Light switch.
In the house that says turn lights off when not in use. I mean, he just had them posted all over. Because turn them off for it. Turn the TV. If nobody's in the room, why is the TV on?
Yeah. And
didn't waste anything.
And that instills not only, that you shouldn't waste your resources, but that costs money. We have to pay for this. This is not free.
Yeah. My brother always tells the story about how Mama used to say, that water's still warm, let your brother get in there and take a bath. It's not too dirty and it's still warm, let him get in there. He said, we were on a strict budget, man. But you did what you did.
Had to do it. And those principles, no doubt, will have to be revisited. And they should be revisited, not just because of whatever economic climate you may be in at the time, but because it's just good, strong principles that'll take you far. Miss Judy's family was raised and thrived on that. You saw the same with Rick and his family as well. I can say the same for mine. Those things were taught in the household. What are you doing? Save that for later. You might want that later when you still have scraps on your plate. My mom says that no one can waste chicken like me. So, I would nibble a little bit and then put the drumstick down. And she's like, "What are you doing? You're not done with that chicken.
Meat on that bone.
Still meat on that bone." Oh my God, I heard that so much. So yeah, waste not, want not is definitely going to have to be one of those principles that come back into play in a very, very big way going forward. So Alabama finally has a new senator. It's official now, right?
It's official.
No.
Official yesterday.
No matter what Roy Moore claims or says.
I'm going to see if he's going to pay for the recount. I don't know.
Millions of dollars that would have to be employed for that recount will have to come out of Roy Moore's campaign if he does push forward. However, it did not. His complaints did not stop Doug Jones from being officially claimed as the next senator. Certified results for the special election were verified yesterday. This is to fill the Senate seat that was vacated by Attorney General Jeffy Sessions. The position will go into effect after Jones is to be sworn in. Doug Jones will be sworn in on the 3rd, on Wednesday. So, sorry, Roy.
Keep it moving. Just keep it moving.
What will be interesting now is if any actual suits are brought to Roy about his allegations, sexual misconduct allegations. We have to talk about Eric Garner's daughter, Erica Garner. She's now suffering officially with what's being called major brain damage. Now, she had a heart attack, right? Not a stroke, is that right?
She had a heart attack. Yesterday we mentioned Amanda Davis, the longtime news anchor out of Atlanta, 62 years old, that she was at the airport in Atlanta getting ready to board a plane to go to her stepfather's funeral and had a massive stroke and passed away that night. And I mentioned yesterday, I got to mention it again today. Take care of yourself. Make sure the heart attacks and strokes are two of the largest killers of Americans, period, across the board. Strokes, 1 out of every 20 deaths is a stroke. Every 40 seconds, somebody's having a stroke. Every 4 minutes, somebody's dying of a stroke. That's a huge statistic. And the difference is that a stroke is like a brain attack, and a heart is a heart attack. The blood flow simply stops. And so, is slowed down to the point that it damages. And so it's very, very serious. And for African Americans, it's even more serious. Yeah. The risk of having the very first stroke is twice as high for blacks as it is for whites. And I was reading, because I kept thinking, why? And so I read one of these articles that says that it's because there is some kind of gene in the DNA of African Americans that make them more susceptible to salt and salt intake, that it affects them differently, and so it causes high blood pressure. So watch your diet. Go take a walk. 30 minutes a day is what they suggest. A walk. To just get the body moving, get the blood flowing, to watch that whole food intake. And one of the number one things they said, bro? Stay away from red meats.
Well.
Yeah. Stay away from red meats. It thickens the blood. And if your blood is thicker, then it's harder for it to flow, which is why they say take an aspirin. The aspirins thin the blood.
Yeah.
Just stop eating the meat.
I don't see why it's so hard for people. You know, just stop.
Because nobody ever tells me.
It's convenient too.
Nobody ever told me. Nobody ever told me that the damage that red meats especially do to my body. I didn't understand that eating those meats was also a cause of diabetes, was also a cause of heart disease, was also a cause of strokes, because it makes your blood too thick for your body to pump it through.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and it starts to block stuff. It blocks arteries.
Yeah.
You know, it clogs up the very vessels that you need to transport the insulin into your bloodstream. So those kinds of things. And if nobody tells you, and so I just, you know, I'm just a good health suggestion. Start doing something. You know, and if it's too much for me to try to do, I'm amazed at how easy it was once I understood.
Yeah.
If I understand what's happening, then I know what to do. Stop smoking. Drink lots of water. And go take a walk. And meditate. It to me is important. So when you take a walk, also just make sure that you take a look at nature, look at what's going on around you, kind of breathe that all in, and meditate on all the goodness and blessings that you have, and that in itself kind of helps, because stress is one of the other causes of heart attack and stroke and all of the diseases that we find in our lives. And so take care of yourself.
Yeah. And capitalize on those steps. Don't go take a walk in nature and meditate and then come home to a bucket of chicken and a cigarette. You're going to negate the progress you just made. So just some advice for the new year to get healthy. And they do mention red meat, but what I've noticed and what we talked about earlier this year was that chicken gets a pass a lot of the times. Your meat intake in general, if you're having these problems, or if you think you could have these problems, if your family members have these problems, needs to decrease, because that also includes a fat intake that you wouldn't get from other food.
And I made a decision for me, because I'm real conscious, and I try not to say what you ought to do is this, what you ought to do is that. You got to go at your own pace, and you got to do what you do. I like to let people know, because they'll ask me, what do you mean you don't eat meat? What do you mean? I stopped eating meat, and I stopped eating dairy, and I stopped eating eggs. And it has worked for me. I'm off of some of my medications. There's some medication I'm still on, but this has been 5 months, so I'm looking at a year that I should be off of all of the medications that I'm on. And I have to work harder on the exercise part. I'm kind of getting there with the whole diet part, that I got that down. But I got to get better with that. But I don't want to say what you need to do is this and what you need to do is that. And if it's for you doing one thing at a time, do one thing at a time. If it's, I'm going to make myself drink more water. I'm going to walk for 30 minutes every day. I'm going to do whatever's going to work for you first, because one of those is better than none of those.
Sure.
Do what you can in your circumstance. Do whatever you can in your perimeter. Sometimes it means waking up an hour early. Sometimes it means going to bed an hour late. But whatever you got to do, just do that to take care of you, because you're important.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And get some sort of plan together as far as helping yourself when you, or if you should need a doctor's attention. The government said that more than 8.7 million people actually signed up for health care coverage for next year under the Obama-era health care law. Yes, Obamacare is still in effect for now, at least. The program that President Trump is hoping and trying to repeal. The tally released yesterday for the healthcare.gov, 39 states that do sign up, was about 80,000 fewer than the initial count that was provided last week. Healthcare.gov enrolled nearly 95% of last year's level, despite a shorter sign-up period and a systematic attempt to negate healthcare.gov. There was funding that was allocated for promotion of the website and for sign-up, and that funding was stripped by the administration. And one could say it was to not just tarnish the legacy of Obamacare, but to make people think that they could not go and use this service anymore. Yet another tactic by your president and mine to help you, America. Someone else is claiming that another one of his underlings has assaulted them now. The Make America Great Again dress girl, the girl who wore the, did you see the dress?
Yeah, I seen that, yes.
Saw the dress? The girl who wore the Make America Great Again dress to the Grammys is now claiming that the former campaign manager of the president, Corey Lewandowski, slapped her on her behind after she told him not to. Joy Villa is her name. She's a Trump supporter. She states that she supports the grabber-in-chief, but she filed a sexual assault report against Lewandowski. She alleged at the November 28th holiday party, he smacked her once, and she told him to not do it anymore, and he smacked her again on the behind. She said she was, quote, shocked and embarrassed, end quote, and that Lewandowski was acting like a clown. Or a sexual predator. But why did she expect differently? I guess you expect the best from people, but...
Yeah, I mean, just because I might agree with you politically doesn't mean that I give you permission to put your hands on my body.
No, of course not. But if someone is on record saying that they sexually assault women freely and there's nothing that anyone says about it because they're famous, shouldn't you kind of anticipate what you're getting into going to his party?
Saying that would say that all Trump supporters are... I wouldn't have thought that.
No.
I wouldn't have assumed that. I don't assume based on someone's political decisions that they're going to sexually assault me. No, I don't.
Well, at any rate, Joy Villa is now bringing charges or at least allegations against Lewandowski, who himself has political aspirations. And hopefully she will see some sort of recompense for this.
You know what, and I just think as a society as a whole, we have to become more cognizant of how we treat each other. And, you know, because I have on a dress that shows my figure, this is not an invitation for you to be insulting. That doesn't happen, and I think we have to take away the blurred lines. Don't make assumptions, and I think in our country as a whole, I mean, just looking at the it's a man's world kind of attitude that has taken place across the board. It's one of those other areas where we start to say, no, you know what? It's not just I deserve equal pay. I deserve equal respect. And that has to happen. It's going to keep coming up because it's invaded every area of our lives. And we've turned a blind eye to it for so long. And so now I think people, especially women, are coming to a place where they feel secure enough in themselves to say, you know what, this is not acceptable. Not acceptable, and I'm going to say it's not acceptable, and I'm going to say it out loud. And whatever the consequences, well, the consequences in the past would be you might lose your job, you might not get a promotion, you might be ostracized because, you know, you're the whistleblower. It's like, I'm over it. No, this is wrong, and I'm not accepting it. Yeah. Period. Yeah. And that across the board, we have to do that just in the way that we treat other people. It's just that simple. Yeah. Treat everyone with dignity and respect, regardless of their, and you know, we have all those disclaimers. we don't discriminate according to sex, race, nationality, religion, sexual orientation, whatever. Can you just respect people?
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Keep your hands to yourself and watch what comes out of your mouth.
Yeah, that's a big one, especially moving forward, and especially when the president doesn't watch what comes out of his mouth. I think that leadership is important, and I think that the standards are set, and certain folks see, oh well, someone is acting inappropriately. I guess it's okay for everyone to act inappropriately, whether it's lying or admitting to sexual assaults on recordings or whatever. I think an environment is attempting to be made more normal, and we heard Michelle Obama say that there's nothing normal about this, but certain folks will use that as an excuse. So you have to combat that at every instance. Speaking of the grabber in chief, he took some time out of golfing yesterday after he parked a pen. Did you see he parked a box truck to keep the president parked a box truck to keep press?
Parked.
He didn't. He doesn't. He doesn't drive.
Yeah.
He doesn't drive things, but he had a box truck parked in front of the viewpoint of where the press was.
Swing, okay.
It's such a good swing too. Okay, it's the best swing. There's no other swing like it, and I can't have that stolen. It's just that simple. So the press wasn't able to see the president golf yesterday, as he's done for the past 3 days straight. Even though he said he was working. These are his words, not ours. His tweets, rather. But he did have a chance to visit some first responders to tout everything he's gotten done in his first year. That's a lie. That's not true at all. So not only is he golfing, he's going and lying to first responders about his record, not thanking them for their service, not wishing them a happy new year, but making up more lies about what he hasn't done. And no, that was a lie. He did not. As a matter of fact, not only does he not have as much legislation signed as Harry Truman, he's got less legislation signed than any other president before him this far along in his term ever. So that was not just an outright lie. It was the opposite of the truth. Alternative facts, though, I would imagine.
Alternative, I love that. That's the term of 2017.
And fake news.
And fake news.
Fake news, those two. And today is Friday, guys. You know, on Fridays we let you talk about whatever you want to talk about. Just keep it clean. But we had a full week. On Tuesday we had Attorney Van Turner, the president of Memphis Green Space. Remember talking about the removal of the Confederate statues there in Memphis?
Yeah.
On Wednesday we had Dr. Tanya Timms Taylor in here with us, talking about the value of learning from the elders. And then on Thursday, of course, we had Attorney Ted Williams with us, talking about the Butler family from Maryland who had a cross burned in their front yard in 1977. Turns out the assailant became a priest.
Terrors.
Mm-hmm. So all of those things, and then we have a story that popped up on our radar that we want to ask you about as well. So stay tuned, and guys on the phone, I promise we're coming straight back to you guys.
228-896-9455. Give us a call. We'll be back.
Every day, more than 10,000 people are